GMP Solar Hartford LLC for certificate of public good, authorizing the installation and operation of 4.99 megawatt solar electric generation facility in Hartford, Vermont. I'm Mary Jo Kolesky. The board is appointing me hearing officer, and I will start by taking the appearances.
Shin Grace for the Department of Public Service. Jen Duggan with the Agency of Natural Resources.
Jeff Hand on behalf of the petitioner as well as GMP. With me is Victoria Westgate, our office. And then just to introduce as witnesses, we have Rod Viennes, Kirk Shields, Ian Jukes, John Jekyll, and Doug Smith.
Just to be clear, I don't think GMP is referred to this case. We never got any notice of appearance or intervention.
I think we may have done a notice of appearance in the beginning as a joint appearance, but we'll double check.
Okay, so I think I would have had to let them into question if there had been a intervention request.
We'll look back at what we filed, but
I believe we should know.
yeah, I think we would just file a notice of appearance because they're in the interconnecting utility.
Yeah, but then I think they need to file an intervention
Okay.
request when they're.
We're happy
I mean, they don't need to be a party,
Yep.
but if you want them to be a party.
We handled it this way in the other similar
I
proceedings, the
think
board's
they
request, but
required intervention, but maybe I'm wrong about that. It's fine either way. Okay, so why don't we start with swearing witnesses?
Sure, we can do it that way, and then I can read into the record. We've reached stipulations and have agreements to submit all the testimony. We just have a few corrections to make, really just to one piece and a clarification on one of the piece.
And are the stipulations going in as exhibits?
They are. We've identified those as GHP-ANR-1 for the stipulation between the petitioner and the Agency of Natural Resources, and GHP-PSD-1 for the stipulation between the petitioner and the Department of Public Service. Public Service Department.
Why don't I start just swearing witnesses? Just get that off. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, yes.
Great. Thanks.
All right, so I'm going to start by identifying the testimony and exhibits that are being submitted to the record, I believe under agreement, although most of the witnesses are here. I'm going to then come back to the couple of pieces of testimony that have some corrections or clarifications. So for the petitioner, we have the pre-filed direct testimony of Rod Viennes with exhibits GHP RV1 through 7, as well as the supplemental pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Viennes with one exhibit, GHP RV2 revised copy of the site plan. Next witness is pre-filed testimony of Kirk Shields with exhibit GHP KWS1, which is his resume. Then supplemental pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Shields with another exhibit, which is GHP KWS-4, which is the decommissioning plan. The next witness is Mr. Doug Smith. We have his direct pre-filed testimony. That is with 4 exhibits, GHP DCS-1 through 4. We have supplemental pre-filed testimony from Mr. Smith, along with exhibit GHP-DCS-3 revised. And then a second supplemental pre-filed testimony of Mr. Smith, which was filed yesterday. Next witness is Mr. Mark Kane. His pre-filed direct testimony with exhibits GHP MK1 through 4. Mr. Jukes is the next testimony, pre-filed testimony of Mr. Jukes with exhibits GHP IJ1 through 3. Then we have the pre-filed direct testimony of Dory Barton with exhibits GHP-DB-1 and 2. And the supplemental pre-filed direct testimony of Dory Barton, which is GHP has GHP DB-3 attached. Next witness is pre-filed direct testimony of John Jekyll with exhibits GHP JJ-1 through 3. And then the pre-filed testimony of Charles Knight, which is GHP CK1-N2 as exhibits. And then, as I just mentioned, there are two stipulations that are being entered into the record, and that's GHP ANR-1, which is stipulation between the petitioner and the Agency of Natural Resources, and GHP PSD-1, which is a stipulation between the petitioner and the Department of Public Service. We have, for the witnesses who are not here, we've also included affidavits with that testimony, attesting to their accuracy. And I just ask all the witnesses here to attest to their accuracy. And I have a couple of clarifying questions. So let me just do that quickly to get that confirmation. We go by order here that we have them. Mr. Smith, do you have any corrections or changes to make to your pre-file or supplemental pre-file testimony?
Not corrections. Yesterday's supplemental testimony addresses the only clarification that I need to make.
Okay, great. Mr. Jekyll, do you have any changes to make to yours?
No,
I'm going to come back to you, Ian, for just a second. Mr. Viennes, do you have any changes to make to your testimony or supplemental testimony?
No, I do not.
Okay. Mr. Shields, do you have any clarifications or supplemental information you'd like to provide on the testimony you've offered in this case?
Yes, I have one update. In my original testimony on page 4, the question was, who will the tax equity investor be? And at the time, we hadn't identified one because we were still talking with several. But we have since selected U.S. Bank as the tax equity partner.
Great, thank you. Any other changes or corrections to make? No? All right, Mr. Jukes, I understand that you have one clarification or correction that you'd like to make to your testimony.
Yes, I do.
What is that?
It's on page 9, third line, to that word appreciable, beginning one.
Let's just all get there. This is page 9, third line. That begins right now with the word operational. So we're adding the word appreciable, operational notes.
Yes.
Okay. And then you had one other correction in the next paragraph, is that correct?
Yes, on line 13. It reads, the nearest residence 42 decibels during daylight hours. I'd like to add, comma, 28 decibels at night.
And so that's just to clarify that your testimony as presented suggested there would only be noise during the day. In fact, the transformers, not the inverters, but the transformers will make some small amount of noise during the evenings as well.
That's correct. Yeah. Whenever energized.
Do you have any other changes or corrections to make to your testimony?
No, I do not.
So I believe that's all we have to present. I think these witnesses are available for questions, unless you want to go ahead and, do you want to go ahead and introduce your testimony?
So I guess, so Sean Foley, please state your name, where you're employed.
My name is Sean Foley, work for the Department of Public Service.
Did you prepare the pre-filed testimony dated November 24th, 2014?
Yes, it is.
Do you have any corrections or changes to make to your pre-filed testimony?
No, I don't.
So, there are no objections to entering the test and exhibits, so they are admitted. All right, so I guess it's me who has the questions. Why don't we start? Start with maybe some easy things here. I think this goes to Mr. Rhines. And this concerns the construction schedule. So I was just wondering, are there hours of construction planned for the project?
You want me to answer, Rod?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, sure. Our normal construction hours are Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and Saturday, 8 to 5.
I think the board's been having construction hours as a condition in the orders, so just wanted to confirm that that was okay, and there's a reason that that would not be okay. Okay, great. So I guess my other question had to do with the final plan that was submitted and the screen proposed for the one house on the southern portion, and whoever can answer this, feel free to answer this. So how would the, and maybe Mr. Killen would have been the better person here, but how would the screening start off? Is it like the heights of the plants? Are they going to be mature, or is there assumed small plants that'll grow over time, and kind of maintenance schedule and so forth will be included with that proposal?
So, we've met with the owner of the house on the southern side of the site on Chicken Trot Lane several times. We have, I think Mr. Kane has a screening proposal in his testimony. And the plantings would not, obviously not be fully mature. And there are different sizes that we could procure. So I think, we're talking about something that's maybe 2 or 3 years old, and then they'll grow to full height.
And I assume the property owners were okay with that. That was
Absolutely,
it.
yeah, they were.
And then, again, I know this is concerns Mr. Knight's testimony, but this project development, do you have any sense for what the cost of the archaeological assessment was? Like the total cost?
About $8,000.
And I think for what the best order of my questions should go. All right, well, maybe we can get into a little bit about, and I think these are questions maybe directed to Kurt Shields and Doug Smith. But I'm trying to understand a little bit better about how the recovery mechanism works under the project, the 60-40 split, and how that exactly works. So I guess some of my questions are, when does the 60% share of capital that GMP has initially, does that go into rate base during the first 5 years? And then, so that's during the PPA period, or, well, let's just start with that. I want to understand that a little better.
Sure. So when GMP makes the 60% investment into the project company, essentially that part will be rate-based. It'll be treated similarly to GMP's investments in Velco, investment in an affiliate, I believe is the right word. So that portion will go into rates. The portion of the capital that is contributed from the tax equity partner does not go into rates. That's just they're extracting tax benefits essentially in depreciation and a little bit of cash from the project as their return. So essentially just the 60% will be impacted as part of rate base.
So, and then what happens during that period to the recs that are generated by the project during the PPA period?
Sure.
Who holds those?
So all products and all attributes will be conveyed to GMP of utility from the project company through the PPA.
a discussion of, once, I guess, let's call it the flip occurs, there's a time period, at which GMP would buy the remaining 5% share of the project. What is anticipated for how long that would take?
Sure, so during the first 5 years, the tax equity investor gets the investment tax credit, they get some depreciation, and they get some cash. And after about 5 years, they will have earned their return on their 40% investment in the project. So at that point, they're basically, the so-called flip occurs, which just means that now the tax equity investor has mostly pulled earned their return already, and now the project, or GMP, owns, we assume ownership of most of their share except for 5% of the company. So at that point, when the ownership flips from the tax equity investor to GMP, only about 5% remains that the tax equity investor will own. And then GMP will have a call option to buy out that remaining 5% interest, which we intend to do, and to hold it as a long-term investment. And it's in the amount of that buyout option is probably around $300,000 or so, and that will buy out the remaining cash flows that they would have otherwise gotten from project revenues.
And that might occur at any point after the flip.
Probably after the first 5 years, then the tax equity investor will have earned their return. And it's likely we could do it after, but it's likely that we'll exercise the buyout option at the point of the flip.
So there's the option to do it either way. So, the decommissioning plan, there's a discussion of that. Where does that fall in the capital structure? Is that held by the tax equity partner or the? So it's, I think the estimate for the decommissioning fund is $270,000. How does that fit in the structure?
Sure. So that is it's a cost that the project company will have to bear at the last stage of the project. So that's factored in on a net present value basis as a cost at the very end to wrap up, decommission, recycle, take the project apart, and leave the land as it was. So it is reflected in the cost of service already, but at the end, as a cost at the end of the
But is there any costs associated with holding the letter of credit or whatever?
Oh,
Like,
sure. I see what you mean.
Or if you escrow, or I think you have a couple of options there, yeah. Who bears that cost, I guess?
Sure. So the project company would bear the cost if we did agree to have a letter of credit while the project company is a project company. We'd like to have, we'll keep the option to petition to have the LLC go away once GMP assumes ownership of it, but during that first initial period of about 5 years, a letter of credit will be in place. I think the cost is maybe $1,000 or $2,000 to have in place. The project company will bear that cost.
Actually, maybe this is a good time to follow up on this, since we're discussing decommissioning fund. The stipulation talks about that the letter of credit would be submitted after the CPT is issued. Now, that's assuming for board approval, I assume? That was the thought there?
Yes, we anticipate the board would need to approve the letter of credit. We'd be happy to submit the form in advance for approval and submit the final right before construction, as we've typically done on other projects.
Right, okay. Yeah, certainly if you have it before CPG is issued and you want it to be included, we could do that, assuming that you follow the templates that we've been using.
Yes. Yep.
It probably should not be a problem. Okay. All right. I think I understand some of this. Okay, so I have some questions for Mr. Smith. First question I have concerns your pre-file testimony. So on page 7, there's a discussion of the need for the project, and in particular, you're addressing whether the project, and I guess I'm a little unclear on this part of it. So the criteria for need includes that the present and future demand cannot be provided in a more cost-effective manner through energy conservation and energy efficiency and load management. And I was just wondering maybe if you could provide a little more detail than what's in the testimony of what kind of analysis was done with regard to whether energy conservation or energy efficiency could meet the needs of demand.
Sure. At a high level, the forecast of electricity requirements that are in my exhibits, like DCS1 with respect to energy, reflect a significant amount of a continuation, basically, of programmatic energy efficiency in the state through the efficiency utility. I don't remember the exact numbers, but we're talking about magnitudes like 1% to 1.5% per year of energy requirements being harvested through energy efficiency investments. So that is why on the exhibit DCS1, that's one of the reasons why the projected energy requirements of GMP's customers decline a bit over the next decade. So it's flat with a little bit of decline to the picture. And that is the type of rate of efficiency savings that's been harvested in recent years in Vermont with the energy efficiency investments. And what I'm saying here is, first, that simply that a continuation of that, what on a national standard is a pretty aggressive efficiency package will continue. And secondly, the point I'm making is that taking into account the magnitude of the company's projected open positions, we could be wrong in that by a lot. If energy efficiency, maybe better technology or other developments caused significantly more energy efficiency to be available over this time period, it would not change the basic conclusions that I point out in terms of the output of this project being needed to meet the electric requirements of our customers. It's not a tight margin.
So why don't we go to your second supplemental testimony? And again, I'm just trying to sort of understand and make sure the record is clear on some of this. So yeah, there's a discussion just about, your changes to your analysis based on the RNS charges. So I'm just trying to understand. Maybe you can explain a little bit about how RNS charges are determined and how that sort of would have impacted the analysis. And then just maybe, I found the testimony a little cryptic, and it said, the uncertainty on whether local distribution generation reduces network loads and RNS charges. So maybe just explaining a bit more.
Okay, so I'll take your advice and start with the notion of just the foundation for the conceptual foundation.
Yeah.
So in short, Green Mountain Power, the charts you see depicted in my exhibits of energy and capacity purchases, there are different ways to present our customers' needs and how they get served. In the market system of ISO New England, the requirements that Green Mountain Power faces each hour are really the net of a couple of things. One is the consumption of our customers, the electrical losses on the T&D system, the Green Mountain Power transmission and distribution system, and also the volumes of distributed generation that may be located around Green Mountain Power's system but are not ISO New England registered generation assets. So if I could give a numerical example, if it's some representative hour and Green Mountain Power's requirements from ISO New England are 500 megawatts, what that might represent is our customers' consumption plus losses on the system adding up to, let's say, 525 megawatts. But 25 megawatts of distributed generation throughout the system producing their output for a net of a requirement of 525 minus 25 distributed generation equals 500 of a net requirement. So that's what we see on an hourly and daily basis as purchase requirements from ISO New England. Turning to the RNS charges, the allocation of regional network system costs is done on a monthly basis based on the single hourly peak demand of the bulk transmission provider. So for us in this case, that means our RNS expenses or charges get determined based on the monthly single peak hour load that is experienced by Velco. And again, that's the net of consumption and losses, but distributed generation as a deduction. So what I just summarized is the current practice. In my example, if the peak hour in a month happened to be that hour I walked through where Green Mountain Power's net or residual load requirement was 500 megawatts, 500 would be the number that determines Green Mountain Power's pro rata share of RNS charges for that month. So why don't I stop there? What I've attempted to do is lay out the foundation of what RNS charges I'm referring to, and these are the numbers which in my testimony I estimate over time and on a levelized basis are worth about 2 cents per kilowatt hour for this project.
Okay, I think I understand that. Yeah, I just actually didn't understand how RNS worked, but it was not clear in the record.
Fair enough.
It was clear in my head, but maybe not the record. So that's what I was trying to understand better. And so then you backed your supplemental testimony has provided a value where you haven't included any reduction in RNS?
In short, my
Levelized value.
my supplemental testimony does include a value for RNS savings, and that value is about 2 cents per kilowatt hour. The second supplemental, the one we filed very recently, simply raises the point that in quite recently, some questions have come up in my experience, speaking with market participants and others who deal with ISO New England costs and power accounting, some uncertainty has come up as to whether the current practice, which I summarized, is the right practice under the ISO New England framework and the open access transmission tariff. So what I'm basically saying in the supplemental testimony is some questions have been raised about whether the current practice is the right one. I think it's going to, I believe that I properly posed and included savings from RNS, transmission avoidance, but I wanted to be clear that some uncertainty has been raised, and I didn't want the board in particular to feel misled or that we had been omitting a material consideration if a later dialogue surfaced about this very point. And I would credit the Public Service Department staff for having a dialogue about that, and they were very supportive of the notion of putting this out here to stimulate just a conversation like this, rather than being silent about it and perhaps it would come up at some later date. So the punchline of my testimony is we don't know right now. It may take a while to conclusively verify or modify my understanding, but either way, the ranking of this project with respect to the 248 criteria, does it fit with our energy plan, the ranking of this project relative to other distributed renewables, would not change.
Okay, I think that's all my questions on some of that. Actually, I will have some more questions concerning on financing of the project, concerning the SIS study. But first, let me change gears just a little bit, and I wanted to address Mr. Juke's testimony concerning the sound from the anticipated from the project. So I think it's page 9 of your testimony, and it's exhibit GHPIJ3. Can't read my own handwriting. So, I just thought it would be helpful to understand a little better about how the noise sound analysis was conducted. I mean, I follow what the map states, but just a little more details about the analysis would be helpful.
Okay. We're modeling simple noise propagation from the maximum level of noise produced by the equipment, by the manufacturer's specs. And we're measuring it, we're trying to create a map of those ISO sound lines, I guess you would call them, and then also measuring it at every important place, like a building or whatever. That sound propagation is not, we're not accounting for any attenuation at all, right? So this is trying to be conservative. So we're trying to be in a position of never stating artificially low numbers for anything. So we're not looking at any vegetation, any atmospheric, any topographic things that would change the sound level. So it's kind of, maybe the way to think of it is as if you were on a calm lake. That's the way that sound's being modeled. Nothing getting in the way. And so and there's many, so all we're doing is we're calculating the sound from every source, right, at a particular location, and then adding them together in that series of equations in there, which is on, if you want to see the actual equation, it's on the page called Sound 3. So it's that logarithmic function.
Yeah, there's a lot of narrative.
Yeah. So we're trying to pick the loudest values we find for the equipment, and like everything on at once, and full sun on the array, making the most noise it can.
Full output of the array.
Right. And the corrections to my testimony earlier intended that, I think the way I stated it maybe gave the impression there was no noise at night, and that's not correct. Anytime a transformer is energized, it makes noise.
And it would always be energized.
Right, as soon as it's online, it's going to make that noise.
Okay. All right. So, the last set of questions concerns the status of the system impact study, and also I want to understand a little bit better about the cost of the system impact study, and also want to understand a little better about the stipulation condition with regard to the SIS study. So, what is the status of the SIS?
It has, this morning, a revised version went back to the consultant who's performing the study. When we study, we look it over. If we make grammatical changes or we find errors, we track the changes, we send it back so that person who's putting their brand on the front is aware of all the changes that we're making and is good with it. We anticipate having the study back today or tomorrow and being able to provide it to the customer, which is us, I guess, that day or maybe the next if the mail is slow. So it should be available for public consumption in the next couple of days.
And that's the final study.
Yes.
Your testimony also mentioned a feasibility?
Facility study?
A facility
Yes.
study. Is that going to be, actually, I thought it was a feasibility, and I was trying to understand
Well,
why.
if that's the case, you can blame these right here.
Oh,
They're not
okay.
good
I was
targets.
confused by why a feasibility study
No.
was being done.
A facility study will be done wherein a system impact study identifies what could the impacts be and what might be some ways of mitigating them. And then the facility study defines which of the available options will be used and puts a more firm cost estimate on them. The system impact study gives kind of a high-level idea of what the cost will be.
Okay, to be clear, your testimony did say facilities. I just misread it. So, when is that expected to be completed? Or is it necessary? Will there be lots of options that have to be looked at?
Well, we'll still do the study, but we pretty much already know what we're going to do. There's going to be, would you like me to list out what needs to be done? Or is that getting too deep into the weeds?
No, sure, that's helpful, actually. I'd like to
Okay.
understand how big changes are needed
Oh.
to make interconnect.
Okay. Until recently, the Creechy 17 circuit is a dedicated feeder down to the North Heartland Hydro Station. And nobody else could attach that line. It was a, I believe, FERC jurisdictional line. And so it went down to North Heartland, and that was it. There was also a part of the GMP Creechy 16 circuit on the same poles for a ways, and then a single phase continued along down to Heartland area, North Heartland Dam area, and beyond. Recently, we had a PV developer want to put 150 kW onto the three-phase section of the dedicated line. And that raised some questions as to whether we could do it, and it was investigated, and yes, we could take back from FERC some of the jurisdiction from the substation down to where that small PV wanted to go in. That would no longer be the FERC line, it would be the GMP line. And it would be open for retail, to serve retail load, is my understanding. I'm not a lawyer, this is my understanding of it. Then, when this project came along, it also wanted to tap into that section of line that was going to be thrown up from FERC to us. So when you combine the 4 megawatts plus of hydro load, tiny little bit of PV, that is in existence there, and this project, the section of wire from the substation down to this project would be overloaded, too many amps for the size wire. So we're going to reconductor that to bigger wire. It will still remain a dual circuit line. It will just have bigger wire up top. I cannot comment right now as to pole height changes or anything like that. Inside the substation, at present, there is no voltage regulation on the Queechee 17 because, as mentioned, it only served the hydro dam, and if it's just them at the end of the line, they could monitor and maintain the voltages they needed. Now, with other customers coming in, be they generation or retail load, we need to be able to provide the voltage regulation from the substation out. So we will be putting a set of regulators just outside the substation. The reason for putting them just outside the substation is the Queechee substation has enclosed switchgear and regulators and things, very old design, ages ago. It's just least cost to put them, I believe it's least cost to put them out on the line. Not for much further into the weeds. Okay, then when we get down to the end of the part that GMP is taking ownership, and there's the small PV, we're going to put a recloser looking down toward Heartland, so if anything happened on the remaining portion of the line to the Heartland Dam, that recloser would open, take that fault offline, and continue to maintain power to the small PV, our PV, and anybody else who may choose to come in.
So,
And a set of voltage regulators.
are those changes part of this project, or those sound like they need board approval, or am I wrong about that? Those sound like extensive. Are they envisioned to be part of this project and seeking approval, or?
That's the first of the details I've heard, so we've not addressed them in the petition at this stage. I think we need to discuss whether they're separate approval or we add them to this as part of the petition.
Okay. And, well, maybe that's something that can be addressed when the SIS is filed. Yeah, what the approach and what the plans are for those upgrades. And then how will the cost of those upgrades?
I can take that one.
Yeah.
The project company will pay for all of the upgrades related to interconnecting to the GMP system. So reconductoring basically all the equipment that Mr. Jekyll was talking about will be borne by the project company.
You mentioned another project also causing some of the interconnection. Does that project share in some of the upgrades? Or?
You mean the little one that I talked
Yeah.
about? That's already in place.
That's already in place.
Yes, and that did not require any upgrades. It just required a change of status of the line from FERC to GMP.
So that was already there. And then, do you have a sense for how much this adds to the project cost? It sounds like it's sort of a large thing.
It is large. In our modeling, we've budgeted for $1.1 million. Our construction folks have done some research since, and I think the tally so far is about $900,000, roughly.
So it's you're estimating that it's within the current project budget.
Right.
And then, this again goes to that whole project split. How does these costs work in the 60-40 split? Is it all in the 60s portion, or is it in the 42 pays for some of it?
Right, so the capital contributions are reflected as 60-40 split between GMP and the tax equity provider. It gets a little bit complicated because now once the investment is made and the project is operating, the tax equity investor initially has rights to 99% of the investment tax credit, the depreciation, and and then there's going to be a lot of cash from PPA revenues flowing from GMP to project company. So costs are all borne by the partners pro rata. So it's not, the costs are not borne specifically by just the GMP ownership. They're borne by the partnership in total.
And so the portion that goes into rate base is the 60% of those costs?
Right, the investment part of the,
So the line upgrades is split 60-40, and then the portion that goes into rate base is just your 60.
right. So all of the, we think of it as all of the project costs, construction, interconnection upgrades, real estate, all of that stuff goes in together in one pile. And then how that is capitalized is the 60-40 split to pay for all of those costs. And then obviously there's operating maintenance expenses, just as a normal part of the project company doing business. And those are shared by the partners in the project.
So those initial estimates, you're stating that the upgrades are coming in roughly at what you initially estimated for project costs, and so they're reflected currently in the project costs.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess just following up on that. So, do you expect to have the system impact study to the board before? And it sounded like in a few days.
It sounds like it, yes.
So, the department, have you looked at, you haven't seen any of this? No. So I'm wondering, just for schedule-wise, I guess we should probably put aside time for that review before the CPG is issued. It seems to make sense to me, rather than having, right now your stipulation is written as a post CPG condition.
That's correct.
But it would seem, since it'll be coming in soon, that would be more appropriate to put into the schedule before the CPG.
I think if we
What
can
parties think of.
accomplish that review as part of this proceeding, that would be helpful, but I think we should talk with the department about when we're going to have it and how we might facilitate that discussion with review.
Yeah, maybe that could be a proposal when it's filed into the record. Because if it's going to be just a few days, I can tell you right now, there won't be a P4D before then. Okay. I think that was all the questions I had for witnesses. I don't know if anybody has any follow-up questions based on my questions.
No follow-up from us.
Okay, great. All right, well, maybe we should just discuss quickly, process-wise, what our next steps are. I mean, we just did a little bit already, but, so is the thought that when you submit the SIS, there'll be a recommendation for just, for a comment period, or?
That may be possible. I'd like to talk with DPS and
Yeah.
the agency about how best to facilitate that. But it could be that we submit the SIS, and then I think what we'd anticipated as the post-CPG, the 2-week comment period, but obviously I'm going to talk with them about what period would be appropriate if we do it pre-CPG.
Yeah, I mean, all the parties are agreeing, suggest whatever. Okay, so, and then, also the second, item was the fund for the decommissioning. Do you anticipate that being submitted before?
We'd be happy to submit, I mean, we have the form the board has used, subject to sign off internally on that. We can submit that this week as the draft of how the letter of credit would be prepared, and then have the board approve that form, and we would file the form when it's executed.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you know, minimizing the number of follow-up orders is always beneficial to all concerned. Okay. And so, when were you looking for is it still around February 18th for?
I think that would be the ideal for us to be able to get into the further construction season.
So, the stipulation did not have proposed findings or CPG. I know that you submitted an initial findings, proposed findings. Do you anticipate submitting another one, or?
Well, I guess I'd look to the hearing officer for suggestions on that. I think it would be relatively easy to update our draft proposed findings and run those by the department and the agency to see if we can submit a joint proposed findings. But there aren't substantial changes, and it's really the limited changes are in the supplemental testimony. So we're happy to do whatever's easiest for you. If you'd like to know.
Well, I guess depending on the schedule of the system impact study, you know, I guess it really depends on what comes out of that. If that's all going to be taken care of before we issue a CPG, there might be more things that needed to be added because of that. So I'm not sure the value of having the findings until after you've sort of worked out that. But if you don't submit final proposed findings, then I would have to send it out for.
Yeah, I think it'd be preferable to do agreed upon proposed findings. We've already started drafting those. We can circulate them as to what's been addressed thus far quickly, and maybe file those.
And maybe adding like construction hours.
Sure.
Also, the template that you used seems a little not consistent with other templates we use, so you might want to look at a recent order and follow that template.
Sure. Makes it easier. We'd be happy to do that.
Okay. So I just noticed the headings are not what we typically use.
Okay. It's been our standard template, but we will update it.
You probably then don't read what we produce back out then.
I hope that's not the case.
Probably. Maybe not. Maybe it's just different hearing officer styles. Anyway, okay. I think that's all I had.
I guess just one other item in the interest of reducing further filings and orders. Would you be willing to accept a oral motion for GMP to intervene in the proceeding? If there's no objection.
Yeah, that's fine.
Motion granted, no objection.
Yeah, okay, motion granted, sorry, I jumped the gun. Okay, yep. All right, I think that's it. So I'll look for a filing on the system impact study and just a recommended schedule of how to deal with the system.